A girl whose school punished her for liking Blaire White, a non-binary coworker who won't stop harassing someone, and in-laws who tried to play emotional political blackmail. We're going to talk about all these crazy stories and so much more in today's Friday episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. On Friday, I take your voice notes and listen to your woke horror stories and your personal situations and scenarios and give you my honest feedback and advice. Link to send those in is in the description. Up first, we're going to listen to the crazy story of a young woman whose school punished her for liking the trans Republican YouTuber Blaire White's content. Yes, seriously. Take a listen.
Hi Brad, I'm Jasmine, a young woman from Sweden, and my liberal high school made me take down my fan art of Blaire White from Instagram because it made other students feel unsafe for me. I am bisexual myself and hold a moderate political stance and try to keep my opinions out of school because like 80% of students are far left and queer of many kinds. Unfortunately, someone found my fan art of Blaire that I posted years before starting this school, and it spread like wildfire, and I lost a few friends I had and got ostracized. It came to the point where I was called to the principal's office, where I was told I make others uncomfortable and unsafe for my so-called extremist views. I was made to delete my posts, but the damage was already done. I was harassed in school. This whole deal affected my already bad mental health to the point where I failed my classes, and I'm now struggling with alcoholism and thoughts and actions. The school didn't help in any of this, and I was basically told that I made this bed and to lie in it. I'm currently in rehab with no friends in my life, but hope to reread my classes in adult schooling. Thankfully, your podcast has helped me feel less alone throughout this, so thank you.
Oh, well, first and foremost, I am so happy that my podcast has helped in even the tiniest way, and I'm so sorry that you're going through all of that. I really admire, honestly, your honesty and vulnerability. Just like even talking about those things, admitting the things you're struggling with can't be easy, and my heart goes out to you. I I'm really honestly I'm proud of you for like getting help, for working to better yourself, and please never give up. I don't know you, but I can be 100% confident the world is a better place with you in it, and a better place with you taking the right steps to improve your life and better the world around you. So, huge shout out to you for all of that. And I am so sorry to hear about this story. It is so insane to me on so many levels. For one, I find it hilarious. And listen, I'm not familiar with Sweden's political context or the context of your super liberal school, but it's got to be one heck of an echo chamber, one heck of an ideological bubble if a bisexual person who likes a trans YouTuber's social views are like extremist and beyond the pale. And I have so many problems with what the school did in your story here because one, it's just not appropriate. Like they shouldn't be policing what you can put on your social media in your private time if it doesn't involve another student. If there was cyberbullying of another student or something, that's a slightly different story. But if you're just posting about the creators you like, that's really nobody's business. That's really not the school's business in any way, shape, or form. And then the idea that it makes other students unsafe is laughable. It's absurd. It's objectively not true. I don't know when we lost sight of like the thing we used to teach toddlers, at least in this country. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Schools should not be sending young people this insane safetyism messaging where, oh, if somebody likes a content creator whose opinions hurt your fifis, you might be unsafe and we have to protect you from that. You are teaching them a false premise, a false idea that words are violence. And more than anything, that's totally unfair to you, but it's also even failing those students because the real world is not a safe space. In the real world, you have to coexist with people with strongly different views than you, including ones that might really upset you or violate or confront or disagree with core elements of your identity. I'll give you an example. I am a gay man. I live in a country where a sizable minority of the country holds religious views that view me and my life as sinful and bad. I have to coexist with that. And I can coexist with it because I don't rely on the approval of others to form my own self esteem. But if I had just been sheltered my whole life from the fact that anybody has these horrible opinions or told they make me unsafe, I'd probably be a nervous wreck. I'd probably struggle to cope. And people are failing. I know they think they're helping, but they are failing students when they do this. And besides, the funniest thing about this is that Blaire is, I mean, she's edgy sometimes and she has controversial opinions that I don't always agree with, but like she's totally a mainstream political commentator. And the idea that she's somehow beyond the pale is kind of laughable in and of itself. But I wish I could say I was that surprised, but I hear from people like this all the time in these kinds of situations, not just in other countries, but here in the US too. Although here in America, you would probably have more legal recourse in terms of free speech and potential lawsuits. I really can't attest to any of that in Sweden, but my heart goes out to you and thank you for sending in the note. Make sure you're subscribed, guys, to the channel. If you aren't yet, do hit that like button while you're at it. Remember, you can send in voice notes at the link in the description. And we're going to get to the next one and hear from a woman who's being ironically bullied and harassed by her non-binary coworker in a pretty ironic way after this. I know my audience doesn't want to end up like this.
Just a reminder that I am very fat and very sexy, and I am 100% glorifying obesity, and there's nothing you can do.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's an amazing device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and even gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. This is so important because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. Optimal metabolic health translates to a ton of benefits, including easier weight management, better fitness results, better sleep, and improved energy levels. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Brad. That's lumen.me/Brad to get 15% off your Lumen. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. Up next, we've got to check in with the loving and tolerant crowd again because another non-binary bully has entered the chat. Let's hear from a friend who sent in this voice note.
I work at a barber shop and we have a they them who has gone out of her way to ridicule me and another female barber about not using the they them pronouns. However, there's two male barbers who always call her a her or a she, and she has never once ever gone off on them to correct her pronouns or to ridicule them for not using the correct pronouns.
Correct.
And it's honestly ridiculous. It creates a hostage a hostile work environment. And, all about equality, right? But she doesn't keep that same energy for the males, just the females. Thank you. Have a great day, Brad.
The tea here is just piping hot. Of course. And I can't even get into my whole actual opinion about non-binary because every time I do, YouTube demonetizes me for hate speech. But y'all know how I feel about this by now. So, seriously, they do. But this is ridiculous. The cherry on top of this one is the sexist double standard of the non-binary who thinks gender isn't real, but seems to make some very real distinctions between the genders here. And look, you should just call this person out. You should be like, listen, you have a total double standard here. You never complain about anybody else. So clearly it's not that deep. You don't get to tell me what I can and can't say. This is my freedom of speech. I would say to this person, if you were really confident in your own sense of self and your own identity, you wouldn't need my validation. You wouldn't need me to go along with it. You're free to call yourself whatever you want. I'm free to say what I like as well. That's how this goes. And if you don't like it, tough. That's how the cookie crumbles, cupcake. That's what I would say to her. And then if she continues to harass you, file a legitimate complaint. honestly, and start documenting this in writing. And at some point, potentially, if your employer were to like fire you from it, you might have some form of legal recourse, and you could talk to an employment attorney. I obviously don't know much about that, but regardless, this should not be happening to you. These people need to learn that tolerance is a two-way street, and as much as they should be free to call themselves what they like, dress how they please, rename themselves, wear whatever hairdo they like, they can't force everyone else in the world to affirm their beliefs and their religion, frankly, because some of this stuff is like a religious belief. And ironically, they would be the first ones who would be outraged if you started wearing a cross to work and telling them that if they want to talk to you, every conversation they must begin with a prayer. Really. And it's not that different. Obviously, you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that to them, and they can't do that to you. And if they can't accept that, and if you have a boss who doesn't back you up, hopefully your boss would back you up. First of all, hopefully your boss has some common sense. But if not, maybe you should work somewhere else. I mean, because you shouldn't have to live like that. You shouldn't have to tolerate that in your workplace. And I'm sorry that you do, but hopefully you can make a difference and take a stand here, because shouldn't be like this. And we've got this entitlement epidemic in society, and we've got to start pushing back on these people. Not literally, of course, but like verbally and with our attitudes and with our stances, because they've just gotten away with bullying people for too long, and enough is enough, in my view. Up next, another day, another dystopian story from the United Kingdom. Let's listen to one young man who called in to tell me that the school banned him from reading his Bible because it made other students uncomfortable. Let's listen.
Hi, Brad. I'm from the UK, and my name is Joe. This happened a year or two ago when I was in sixth form, which is essentially the equivalent of the end of high school here. Um, I'm a Christian, and I used to wear a crucifix, and I would read my Bible in the morning during our free time. And they pulled me into the office, and they told me that my reading of the Bible and my visibly wearing a crucifix could pose some, and I quote, emotional distress to students of other or no faith. Unfortunately, I didn't push back on this because I was a bit of a doormat at the time. I did refuse to take my crucifix off, but I relented and I said I would stop bringing my Bible in. Which now I think back on it is kind of insane, given that this was a majority Christian school in the UK, which is majority Christian, and I do just think that, like, I want to get your thoughts on this. Is this as insane as I think it was? Because it wasn't like they were banning all religious artifacts. Like, there were students with like hijabs and even burqas.
Not my jaw dropping at the last part. You're telling me that a Bible makes people unsafe, but not Islamic garb. To be clear, I do think people should be allowed to do both. But if one of those is like more likely to legitimately make LGBTQ students feel unsafe or something, it isn't the Bible, okay? If we're just being so for real. Not shading all Muslims. I know there's a diversity of beliefs, but I'm just saying, in general, one of these religions is more hostile than the other. Not in all cases, not all people, but y'all know what I'm saying. So that's incredibly ironic and hypocritical to me. But also, the answer to your question is yes. This is exactly as insane as you think it is. In fact, it's probably worse. It seems worse to us than it even does to you, because it's hard to understand how just crazy something is when you're in the middle of it. It almost seems normalized to some extent. And unfortunately, you're in the context of the United Kingdom, where people are going to jail over tweets now, and they're investigating people every single day over posts on social media. So in many ways, I do think the United Kingdom has fallen when it comes to freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They are imprisoning people for silently praying. It is, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic. It is kind of dystopian. It's kind of Orwellian. And to me, it's such a important reminder of why the First Amendment is a non-negotiable, why we've got to stand up and stick up for it, no matter who's trying to chip away at it. And we have to be pretty hardcore absolutists on it, because in the United States, if this situation happened, you would actually have legal recourse. You could sue your school, and they would be violating the law by doing this to you. In the United Kingdom, I have no idea. They might actually be allowed to do it, but it doesn't make it right. I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person, but freedom of religion is a human right. And in the United States, it's a constitutional right, but they are violating your human rights by stopping you from practicing your religion in ways that hurt no one else and affect no one else. Like you wearing a cross or you reading a book doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't infringe on anyone else's rights. It's just you expressing your own faith in public, out loud, or even in your head in the case of reading a book. That's allowed. That's your right. And by stopping you from doing that, they're violating your rights, your human rights, especially. And again, they're sending this bogus message that, oh, ideas or words or beliefs make people unsafe or uncomfortable. You do not have a right to comfort, folks. Life is not comfortable. So stop teaching young people, high schoolers, that they have the right to feel comfortable at all times. No, teach them that sometimes in the real world, you have to coexist with people who have beliefs that might offend you, who believe or have values that you strongly disagree with. And as long as they're not directly infringing your rights or harming you, you have to cope. Part of being an adult is coping. And I can mostly speak to the US, but I imagine something pretty similar is happening overseas across the pond. People don't know how to cope anymore. They just constantly want to play the victim and melt down and act like they're entitled to some kind of safe space. You're entitled to nothing except not having your rights violated or not being harmed by someone else. You are not entitled to not be in the same space as somebody reading a book that might hurt your feelings. Then don't read it. Then look somewhere else. It's not that hard. It's not that deep. I'm sorry you had to deal with this. But also, don't beat yourself up too much for the fact that you didn't take a bigger stand. You were a teenager, okay? And maybe you could have, maybe you should have, but like, it's normal as a 16, 17-year-old, whatever, to not want to rock the boat, to not want to be the controversial kid, to succumb to social pressure. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a bad guy. But hopefully in your adult life, if you encounter a situation like this, you will stand up for yourself and your beliefs more forcefully. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And remember to hit the like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed. Plus, the link is in the description to send in voice notes with your woke horror stories for me to potentially listen to on an upcoming show. Up next, we've got another story about weaponized, bogus claims of racism. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Brad. So I used to manage a sandwich shop up in First Hill, Seattle, and I had a woman come in one time, ordered about 10 minutes before we closed, and came 10 minutes after we closed. I had already locked the door. I had already closed everything down. It was a slow afternoon, and now I was getting ready to leave. But I'm like, okay, she had already paid online. She ordered her sandwich, so I'll let her in, give her a sandwich, whatever. She comes in, decides it's not fresh enough, and tells me that I'm going to remake it for her, or she's not going to leave.
Oh?
I explained I wasn't going to do that, but I'd be happy to refund it. Nope, you're going to remake my sandwich, and refused to leave till I had to call the police and have them finally arrest her because she refused to leave even when the police got there. The whole time screaming I was racist because she was black and I was white, and this was all about racism. Meanwhile, no store in their right mind is going to do that. Turn the ovens back on, open everything back up because somebody wants something remade after they arrived late. This is very typical of this entitlement that is just growing and growing in certain communities where if you don't get your way, it's because of racism. And immediately, that's what everyone goes to. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I hear stories like this all the time, and it's a shame because, actual racism is evil, right? And I'm sure it still does happen to some extent in this country where people are treated wrongly or unfairly because of their skin color, their race, their ethnicity, what have you, and that's really wrong. We should never be treating people differently because of things they can't control or change about themselves. It's not kind, it's not fair, and in many cases it is also illegal. But the weaponization of it is kind of out of control to me. I really do believe that people have realized that maybe in 2020, 2021, they could just invoke racism and then always get their way. But thankfully, people seem to be like getting fed up with it, because I come back to this theme a lot, but I really do believe that we've had a bit of a boy who cried wolf problem in society, where they overuse these terms: racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, blah, 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 and just threw them around like candy on Halloween about anything they didn't like, or anytime people wanted to get their way. And it wasn't just actual members of these groups doing it. It was also their like woke white allies as well. And those words started to lose their power. So now I do actually think we've seen a resurgence in some genuine bigotry, which I don't support and am really dismayed to see. But it's like, what did you expect when people started abusing the system in such a widespread manner? I think you did absolutely nothing wrong based on your telling of the story. I mean, it was nice of you to even serve her. If she got there 10 minutes after you closed and the door was locked and you were gone, she wouldn't really be entitled to anything other than maybe a refund, but you offered her that. So she has no complaints. She has no right to make you fire back up the ovens and reopen the store after it's closed. The entitlement is out of control. And also, good for you for calling the police, because some people don't want to call the police on a Black person because they feel like, especially in these liberal bubbles, like I think you said Seattle, they've been told that's problematic. And of course it is if you're doing it unfairly, but if there's actually a crime happening or a reason to, you should call the police, whether it's a white person, a Black person, or a person of any background. That's why the police exist and what they're there for. And you don't have the right to throw a fit in a store and refuse to leave after they're closed. That's called trespassing, and you should catch a charge. The one piece of advice I would offer, that I offer to business owners and anybody who works in this kind of environment, is to have some sort of camera and audio set up so that you have a record of this kind of thing. You have proof of what happened, so that if she were to like make accusations against you publicly, or go to the media and complain about you and accuse the store of racism or anything like that, you would have hard receipts and proof that there was no racism, that the racism is not in the room with us. Because otherwise it becomes a bit of a he said, she said, and that's leaves ambiguity for people to not know and to be worried that maybe you actually did do something wrong. And when you didn't, having that evidence is a huge help. But I'm sorry you've had that experience. I would encourage you and everyone else to never hold it against an entire group of people, the bad behavior of certain individuals, because it's no one's fault but that own individuals. But you still shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing. And by all accounts, it sounds like you did exactly what I would have done. Up next, we are going to hear from somebody whose in-laws tried to emotionally blackmail him into voting for Kamala. And I can relate to this one on a personal level, but not about my in-laws. But I'll get into that. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Brad. I hope you're doing well. My name's Tim, but I promise I won't call you evil because you believe in free trade. I have a story for you today. My in-laws are your standard vote blue no matter who, and it really showed in the 2024 election with fervent support of Kamala, which brings us to my story. The week after Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala was crowned the candidate, I was dropping off my two daughters at my in-laws' house. While walking through the house, my father-in-law says to me, "I've got to be honest with you. If you're not voting for Kamala, I'm never talking to you again." Now, my wife and I have been together for 10 years. I'm used to some unhinged comments like my mother-in-law saying that Trump is going to put homosexuals in internment camps. But I wasn't going to take this, though. I shrugged my shoulders and said, "Well, I'm not voting for Kamala, so you do what you need to do." Finished dropping off my kids and left with a "have a good one," which was met by silence. Later that day at work, I get a fairly similar text from both him and my mother-in-law, not apologizing, but with some diatribe about how democracy is at stake. I chuckled and responded to both that it's ironic they're claiming democracy is at stake when the Democrats inserted a candidate after actively quelling primary elections during the year, and you were both trying to emotionally manipulate me into voting for your candidate. Everything ended up blowing up and was fine for the rest of the year. They kind of accepted that, but it was a funny story. I figured that your audience might.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but it's also a horrifying one. Like, where do these people get off? The entitlement is out of control. You do not have the right to control your family members and what they can think and believe and who they can support politically. That's not how this works. And you would think that they would be a little bit more humble, because presumably having a relationship to their grandchildren is very important to them, like if they're like most people, and actively mistreating their son-in-law like this is a good way to have that relationship curtailed or limited. So, I mean, it would be totally, you would be totally within your rights to draw some kind of a boundary with them and say that, listen, if you can't treat my family respectfully, you will lose access to it. And hopefully your partner, your wife would be on board with that, and you guys could be in unison. They don't have the right to do this. The same way you don't have the right to tell them that they have to support Trump. Yeah, they don't have the right to do that to you. And it is so funny, the gays in camps thing. I remember that from the first term. They said Pence would do that, and the memes were hilarious. It never happened, obviously. Look, I've been critical of a lot of parts of the Trump administration, but the derangement is absolutely there among some people. And even then, like, let them have their Delulu beliefs if they want. But again, you can't control others. And this one rings true to me because I had an experience like this where my grandmother on my father's side, may she rest in peace, had breast cancer in the build up to, well, she had it for years, but she had it and then she eventually passed away from it, which is very sad. But she had it in the build up to the 2020 election. And I had not a close relationship with her, but we did talk. And she said something to the effect of me. I don't remember the exact details, but like, my last wish to you is that to ask you to vote for Biden or something, because she just couldn't live with the idea of Trump winning again. And I remember being so pissed off by that on so many levels, because it's like, you are emotionally manipulating me with your cancer diagnosis to try to control who I vote for. And I did what I always do in 2020. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. If I even voted at all, I don't, I may have skipped that year, but I didn't vote for Trump, but I also wasn't voting for Biden. And I was definitely not after she tried to do that to control me. Like, if anything, that was never going to have the intended effect. It was only going to do the opposite. But people need to be put in their place when they try these kinds of things. It is not okay to control and manipulate your family members in these kinds of unhealthy and toxic ways. And you need to stand up for yourself if they try it again, and set boundaries, because we can't tolerate this kind of behavior. It's gotten out of control, and people need to get checked on it when they try it. Okay, up next, we're going to hear a voice note from a nurse who has encountered the same kind of woke nonsense in her professional capacity.
So, I have a funny woke story for you. So, I went back to college for the first time in 6 years to become a CNA, certified nursing assistant. And towards the end of the class, when I was prepping for my final exam, I watched this teacher who live streams and helps you prep for the final exam. And she teaches a real class, but also live streams. So, she was taking roll call. And after roll call, this person raised their hand and said, "Is it stated in the care plan the person's pronouns?" Meanwhile, for a CNA, you're mostly taking care of older people in a nursing home, so I don't think that's really a problem if it's a he, she, or a they, because they're probably not, if we're being honest. But I just thought it was kind of silly, and the teacher danced around the question because, of course, she didn't want to upset this person. But I just think that's so silly to be focused on. And the landscape is a hell of a lot different from when I left, because these were not questions that people would ask. Instead, they would be prepping for their final exam, not worried about what pronouns to call the patient, because I just find that silly, but yeah, kind of wild.
Yeah, you and me both, sister, find that kind of silly. I'm actually concerned. Obviously, I think people who are liberal or conservative or progressive or libertarian or whatever could all be good doctors, good nurses, good medical professionals. It's about your like competence and professionalism and your ability to keep your politics out of it. The same way that if you're, a Republican doctor and you have somebody in there, you need to treat them and set your values aside. Woke people need to do that too, but they really seem to struggle with it sometimes. And I do worry about the rise of like woke pseudoscience in medicine, because the idea that you have to balance the fact that if you have a patient, for example, who identifies as non-binary, it's not your place as a doctor to set them straight about that. It's like, you obviously just have to treat their medical condition. But I do worry about these activist types infiltrating medicine. They've taken over and hijacked a lot of once prestigious and serious organizations. There's actually been some pretty extensive reporting about this by my friend Katie Herzog. I think she did a story on it for the Free Press that people can look up if they're interested. But some of this ideology is creeping into medicine, and that's just really concerning to me, especially anytime there's matters of life and death. Just keep the woke shit out. I feel like that's not too much to ask. Keep the DEI stuff out, meritocracy, focus on the facts, check your ideology at the door. That really shouldn't be too much to ask, I don't think. But in 2025, maybe it is. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks to everyone who sent in a voice note for today's episode. The link is in the description to send in more if you guys are interested in having me react to your woke horror stories or personal life situations. And make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And we'll talk again real soon.